hardly a secret that the palace has already conducted secret meetings with members of the government to discuss putting the plan into action.
What if I told you the House of Lords just took the first step to erase Meghan Markle's royal identity completely? In a stunning turn of events, the House of Lords has officially launched a major petition demanding Meghan Markle be stripped of every royal title, no more Duchess, and absolutely no HRH. This explosive move didn't come out of nowhere. It follows months of escalating public outrage, secret palace briefings, and a royal family teetering on the edge of collapse. Behind the scenes, alliances are fracturing, Parliament is being pulled into the chaos, and the monarchy itself may never be the same again. And in the middle of it all, Prince Harry. What happens next could redraw the entire royal line. Stay with us. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It happened 1 minute ago, but the ripple effects are about to shake the very foundation of the British monarchy. The news struck like a bolt of lightning through Buckingham Palace and down into the marble corridors of Parliament. A high-ranking member of the House of Lords has launched a formal petition to strip Meghan Markle of every last royal title she holds. Not tomorrow. Not next month. Now. And the consequences could be catastrophic for Meghan, for Prince Harry, and for the monarchy itself. The air in London this morning was unusually tense. Journalists huddled around the gates of Westminster, their camera crews jostling for space, while senior aides whispered behind polished oak doors. Onlookers could sense it in the wind. A political bombshell was about to drop, and it had Meghan Markle's name written all over it. Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, a title once given with fanfare and hope, now sits at the center of the most dramatic constitutional crisis the royal family has seen since the abdication of Edward VIII. It's a stunning fall from grace. But how did it come to this? What did Meghan do, or fail to do, that provoked the House of Lords to call for her total expulsion from the royal structure? And more importantly, what does this say about the monarchy's attempt to modernize in an increasingly polarized world? To understand the significance of what just happened, we need to rewind the clock. Meghan Markle's entry into the royal family in 2018 was heralded as a new dawn. She was American, biracial, and a former actress, three things that had never coalesced in the House of Windsor. Her marriage to Prince Harry was framed as a powerful symbol of progress, one that the royal institution hoped would bridge the widening chasm between tradition and relevance. The world watched the couple's wedding, a global media spectacle watched by nearly 2 billion people. Choirs sang gospel, Oprah was in the pews, and the Archbishop of Canterbury offered his blessing. It was meant to signal the future, a more inclusive, more diverse, and more dynamic royal family. For a brief moment, it seemed like the monarchy had caught up with the times. But that fairy tale didn't last long. By early 2020, just 2 years after that historic wedding, Harry and Meghan stunned the world with their announcement to step back from royal duties. They weren't merely requesting time off, they were walking away. The announcement, posted bluntly on Instagram, blindsided Buckingham Palace and triggered a chain reaction that has only intensified in the years since. They moved to North America, signed multi-million-dollar media deals, and began releasing unfiltered accounts of royal life that shocked audiences worldwide. In their bombshell Oprah interview in March 2021, Meghan alleged that unnamed members of the royal family raised concerns and conversations about how dark Archie's skin might be when he's born. The gravity of that claim was seismic. It wasn't just a personal grievance, it was an accusation that the royal family harbored racism within its ranks. The palace responded with a now infamous statement. Recollections may vary, but the damage was done. The rift was public, painful, and growing. Now, 3 years later, it appears that patience among Britain's political elites has run out. The House of Lords, typically a chamber known for its formality and restraint, has done something it rarely does: take direct aim at a royal figure. The petition, spearheaded by several influential peers, claims Meghan Markle's actions have brought disrepute to the crown, citing a pattern of behavior inconsistent with the honor and dignity expected of royal title holders. This is not a symbolic gesture. The petition, while not legally binding on its own, carries immense weight. If it gains enough traction, it could become a formal motion in Parliament. And if Parliament passes a bill to revoke Meghan's titles, it would require only the monarch's approval. A monarch who, ironically, has been navigating cancer treatment while trying to preserve the unity of his fragmented family. Behind closed doors, insiders say King Charles is torn. On one hand, he wants to modernize the monarchy and respect his son's choices. On the other, he understands the gravity of royal titles and what it means to wield them. Allowing Meghan to retain the Duchess of Sussex title while operating outside the royal framework, launching podcasts, penning children's books, and producing Netflix docuseries has become increasingly controversial. Public sentiment has also shifted. Polls suggest that a growing number of Britons believe Meghan should no longer hold any royal titles, especially as her commercial ventures and tell-all interviews continue to dominate headlines. To many, it feels like she wants the privilege without the responsibility, the glamour without the grind. And that's what makes today's news so explosive. The House of Lords petition isn't just about titles, it's about the soul of the monarchy. It asks fundamental questions. Who gets to be royal? Can someone criticize the crown and still wear its honors? And what happens when public trust in those symbols begins to erode? This petition marks a turning point. For years, the crown has weathered scandal after scandal, from Prince Andrew's legal battles to Harry and Meghan's revelations. But this is different. It is, for the first time, an institutional move from within the British government to redraw the boundaries of royal legitimacy. The timing, too, is significant. As the monarchy prepares for a future without Queen Elizabeth II, who acted as a unifying figure for 70 years, the question of what and who defines royal integrity becomes more urgent. Meghan's titles, once symbolic of hope and inclusion, now risk becoming emblems of division and controversy. In the middle of all this stands Prince Harry. The petition does not mention stripping him of his titles yet. But how long can he remain untouched if the campaign against Meghan gathers steam? Can the monarchy separate the Duke from the Duchess in the eyes of the public, or are they forever bound together in both brand and blame? According to sources close to the lords involved in the petition, this is not a partisan effort. It spans members of different political affiliations, all reportedly motivated by a shared belief that the monarchy must draw a line. One source was quoted as saying, "If we allow people to exploit their royal titles while openly criticizing the institution, then we undermine the entire constitutional monarchy. Titles must be earned and protected." The reaction across social media has been swift and divided. Supporters of Meghan argue that the petition is driven by outdated traditions and thinly veiled prejudice. Critics say it's about accountability and standards. Meanwhile, political analysts are already speculating about how this move could affect public support for the monarchy as a whole. But here's the part that no one saw coming. Reports are emerging that a small but vocal faction within the Lords is pushing for the petition to go even further. They want a review of how royal titles are granted altogether, suggesting future royals must meet stricter public service criteria before being granted titles with land-based associations like Sussex, Cornwall, or Cambridge. That idea alone has stirred the pot. If adopted, it could forever change how the monarchy operates, especially for younger royals like Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. As we bring this introduction to a close, let's be clear, this isn't just about Meghan Markle. It's about power, identity, legacy. It's about a centuries-old institution trying to redefine itself in real time, while balancing the demands of tradition, public opinion, and internal family chaos. And so, as the petition begins its journey through the halls of government, one question looms larger than all the rest. Will Meghan Markle be remembered as a trailblazer who challenged outdated norms, or as a cautionary tale of what happens when royalty clashes with rebellion? Because 1 minute ago, the story changed. The corridors of the House of Lords are rarely the site of political fireworks. Composed of life peers, hereditary nobles, and spiritual lords, it is traditionally a place of deliberation and decorum. But on this occasion, centuries-old velvet benches and wood-paneled walls bore witness to an explosive proposal that jolted the very institution it is meant to serve. A formal motion to reconsider the legitimacy of Meghan Markle's continued use of royal titles. To say that the proposal was unexpected would be a grave understatement. Lords and baronesses who had spent years observing constitutional matters with a quiet hand found themselves amid the unfolding of what some are already calling a constitutional thunderstorm. The motion, formally introduced by Lord Coleridge, an old-school peer with a reputation for protecting royal traditions, was titled in neutral language. But make no mistake, its aim was pointed directly at the Duchess of Sussex. Behind closed doors, the language used to describe the intent of the petition was far more candid. Lord Coleridge and his supporters spoke of protecting the dignity of the monarchy, preserving constitutional balance, and ending a pattern of exploitation that brings discredit to royal tradition. These weren't idle musings. They were indictments, sharp, direct, and deliberate. The text of the petition made its way across Westminster quickly. It accused Meghan Markle of leveraging the privileges and associations of royal titles for commercial, personal, and political gain, an accusation that has grown louder ever since she and Prince Harry stepped down from royal duties in 2020. The document did not name specific interviews, podcasts, or productions, but it didn't need to. The implications were crystal clear to anyone who had followed the Sussexes' path from Windsor Castle to Hollywood studios. Even among those peers who were initially hesitant, the petition sparked a wave of quiet agreement. Some who spoke under condition of anonymity acknowledged that this was a matter long overdue. As one life peer stated, it isn't about personality. It's about principle. When you step away from service, you should also step away from its symbols. At the heart of the debate lies a philosophical question that Britain has not fully confronted in decades. What does it mean to be royal in the modern age? Can titles remain purely ceremonial when their holders operate in the realm of celebrity, activism, and business? Is the monarchy a sacred institution, or merely a brand? The Markle question sits uneasily at the intersection of all these tensions. Several members of the Lords pushed back immediately. Baroness O'Shaughnessy, a known moderate with leanings toward royal modernization, warned that the petition could dangerously politicize the monarchy. She asked whether revoking titles from one individual might set a precedent for punishing anyone in the royal circle who expressed disagreement with the palace or moved abroad. Are we creating a litmus test for loyalty, she asked, or a standard for silence? Yet her words were met with swift counterpoints from peers who argue that silence is not the goal, integrity is. One of the most forceful speeches came from Lord Montclair, a constitutional purist who drew a hard line. If the Duchess of Sussex wishes to live as a free citizen, with all the privileges that come with American liberty and commercial ambition, she may. But let her do so as Meghan Markle, not as a duchess who profits from a title while undermining the institution that granted it. It is this view that has found traction beyond Westminster's chambers. Polling data released just hours after the petition went public showed a dramatic shift in public opinion. A full 62% of surveyed Britons said they supported revoking Meghan's royal titles, with only 18% in favor of allowing her to retain them. Even more telling was that nearly 40% of respondents under the age of 35, typically more sympathetic to the Sussexes, expressed support for the petition, citing concerns over commercial misuse of royal status. As this debate unfolded in Parliament, reactions from inside the palace were notably muted, at least in public. But according to insiders, King Charles and his advisors were already locked in a series of urgent consultations. Stripping a royal title is not a simple act, even if it garners political support. It involves legal processes, constitutional sensitivity, and perhaps most significantly, emotional fallout within the family. For King Charles, this moment is a cruel intersection of duty and paternity. He may be sovereign, but he is also a father trying to maintain a shred of connection with his younger son and daughter-in-law. Reports suggest that Charles has privately expressed frustration over Meghan and Harry's public choices but has resisted harsher measures for fear of permanently alienating them. Now, with Parliament potentially acting on its own, the monarch may be forced to take a public position he has long sought to avoid. For Prince William, the matter is reportedly less complicated. Royal insiders allege that the heir to the throne has grown increasingly firm in his belief that Harry and Meghan's ongoing media ventures are incompatible with royal dignity. Some even claim William supports the Lords' petition behind the scenes, though his office, in keeping with royal protocol, has declined to comment. And then there's Prince Harry, absent from the UK, residing in Montecito, and likely watching the storm unfold from an ocean away. While the petition does not directly target him, at least not yet, its implications are far-reaching. If Meghan is stripped of her titles, what happens to the joint brand of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex? Will Harry remain a duke while his wife becomes a private citizen again? And what would that mean for their lucrative media empire, which is built in no small part on their royal cachet? Even more pressing is whether this petition might drive a deeper wedge between Harry and the rest of his family. With the memory of Queen Elizabeth still fresh in the public mind, and the monarchy's future uncertain amid King Charles's illness, many had hoped for some kind of reconciliation. This motion could extinguish those hopes entirely. Critics of the petition have warned that it risks weaponizing royal titles for political gain. They argue that once Parliament gets into the business of granting or stripping honors based on perceived behavior, it opens the door to future abuses. What's next, they ask, monitoring the private lives of every titled royal? Punishing dissenters? But for supporters of the motion, that's a strawman argument. They claim this is a unique case, driven not by gossip, but by repeated actions that have brought global embarrassment to the monarchy. The Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, the memoir, the ongoing accusations. In their view, Meghan hasn't just stepped outside her role, she's taken aim at the very house that welcomed her. As of now, the petition is still gaining support. Dozens of members of the House of Lords have signed on, and discussions are already underway about turning it into a formal bill. If that happens, it would require debate in the House of Commons as well, putting pressure on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to take a position on what has become one of the most divisive royal issues in modern history. Downing Street has remained carefully noncommittal. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister stated that the matter of royal titles is a constitutional question for the Crown, not the Cabinet. But behind the scenes, political strategists are closely watching public sentiment. With a general election on the horizon, no one wants to be caught on the wrong side of a cultural firestorm that resonates so deeply with the electorate. Meanwhile, international media has seized on the story with predictable intensity. American networks have already lined up primetime specials. European broadcasters are framing the debate as a clash between archaic monarchy and modern identity. And in Australia and Canada, both constitutional monarchies themselves, the petition has ignited fresh conversations about the future of royal influence in former colonies. Back in Britain, the symbolic weight of the motion is already being felt. The last time such an aggressive effort was mounted against a royal figure was during the Duke of Windsor's post-abdication years, a period that saw the former King Edward VIII live in semi-exile after marrying American divorcee Wallis Simpson. The comparison is not lost on historians or on the royal family. The idea that Meghan Markle might someday be remembered in the same breath as Wallis Simpson, another American woman whose romance with a royal led to a crisis of national identity, is as poetic as it is tragic. And so, the House of Lords stands at a crossroads. In the coming weeks, the motion will be discussed, debated, and possibly transformed into law. Whatever happens, one thing is certain, the monarchy will not emerge from this moment unchanged. Inside the palatial walls of Buckingham Palace, where tradition is measured in centuries and discretion is the highest currency, a deep and chilling silence swept across the royal corridors in the hours after the House of Lords unveiled its petition. For all the grandeur of gilded ceilings, priceless tapestries, and marble columns, the atmosphere was thick with a heavy weight, one that could not be washed away by protocol or pleasantries. The petition had not been anticipated, at least not to this extent. The royal household is no stranger to controversy, but what unfolded within Parliament struck at the monarchy's core in a way few living royals had ever witnessed. Not since the fallout of Princess Diana's BBC Panorama interview had such institutional panic gripped the royal family. Behind closed doors, meetings were convened at a frantic pace. Advisors, legal counsel, and senior aides were summoned from Windsor, Clarence House, and Sandringham. Every available strategist was pulled into what became an emergency response war room. The question wasn't just how to respond, it was whether to respond at all. At the center of this internal storm sat King Charles III. His face, often described by palace insiders as unreadable in times of turmoil, reportedly betrayed a deep sadness this time. The monarch, already contending with serious health challenges, was now faced with a constitutional crisis that implicated his youngest son's wife, and by extension, the entire family. Sources close to the palace say Charles did not immediately speak when he was handed a copy of the petition. Instead, he studied the contents silently, his fingers pressed tightly together in a steeple. His personal secretary reportedly asked if he wanted a response drafted for the press. The king waved the suggestion off. His eyes, according to those present, seemed heavy with more than just concern. They were filled with personal pain. Charles's dilemma was both public and private. As sovereign, he is expected to rise above political skirmishes. But as a father, he is torn between duty to the crown and a father's natural instinct to protect his family. Yet Meghan Markle was never a daughter to him in the same way Princess Diana had been a thorn or balm to his image. Meghan was always an outsider. And now, The Court of Parliament had declared her position within the monarchy unacceptable. Queen Camilla's response was strikingly different. Known within palace circles for her pragmatism and willingness to speak plainly where others tread carefully, she is said to have responded to the petition with what one aide described as icy composure. According to insiders, Camilla had long believed that Meghan's continued use of royal titles, despite her departure from public duties, presented an ongoing vulnerability for the monarchy. Camilla is said to have remarked during one internal conversation, if she doesn't want to be a working royal, she shouldn't have the title. You don't get to cherry-pick the parts of royal life that suit you. This view, while firm, was not universally shared. Prince William, now the Prince of Wales, reportedly maintained a measured approach in his discussions with palace advisors. Yet those who have observed his growing influence within the family suggest that his silence is less about uncertainty and more about strategy. Unlike his father, William is not bound by the cautious instincts of an older monarch trying to preserve unity. He is the future king, an office that requires decisiveness. And those close to him have noted that William has grown increasingly frustrated with Harry and Meghan's actions over the past 2 years. The Netflix documentary, the Spotify deals, the tell-all memoirs, each step, in William's eyes, took them further from the family's values and closer to the world of reality entertainment. For William, the petition was less a surprise and more a vindication. He won't say it publicly, one insider confided, but he supports it. Not because he wants to hurt his brother, because he thinks the institution must come first. Princess, and often considered the moral compass of the monarchy, was reportedly even more candid. Known for her no-nonsense attitude and unwavering dedication to public duty, and allegedly viewed the petition as an overdue reckoning. She's always believed titles should reflect service, a former palace equerry said. She took on over 400 engagements last year, never asked for attention, never made a fuss. To her, someone using a royal title for fame or profit without contributing, it's an insult. Indeed, his response was said to be blunt and without sentiment. In one private meeting with royal advisors, she reportedly said, "Let Parliament handle it. If it takes political pressure to protect royal integrity, then so be it." The monarchy isn't a stage for Netflix. While internal views on Meghan's titles varied in tone, there was little disagreement over one matter: the need for caution. The palace knew that any statement, any leak, any gesture from the royal household could be interpreted as interference. Worse still, it could be seen as taking sides in an increasingly polarized public debate. That didn't mean the family was inactive. Quite the opposite. A flurry of behind-the-scenes activity began. Legal teams were ordered to begin combing through the language of the petition to understand its legal ramifications. Would stripping Meghan's title require royal assent? Would it violate existing protocols of peerage and hereditary law? Could it backfire by igniting sympathy for the Duchess? These legal consultations extended into the wee hours. Teams at both Buckingham Palace and Clarence House coordinated with constitutional experts, reviewing everything from the 1917 letters patent issued by King George V to recent amendments under Queen Elizabeth II's reign. One thing became clear: if Parliament acted, the Crown would need to respond, either by enforcing the petition's will or by quietly resisting it. Meanwhile, the Royal Press Office found itself in disarray. The volume of inquiries from British and international media outlets was staggering. CNN, BBC, Sky News, Le Monde, Der Spiegel, reporters demanded statements, quotes, clarifications. The official line remained one of silence. "We do not comment on parliamentary matters," the palace reiterated. But behind that wall of silence, drafts of possible press releases were debated, edited, and ultimately shelved. For all the palace's efforts to contain the situation, signs of fracture began to show. Leaks started to emerge. A trusted source at Sandringham shared that Charles had requested a private phone call with Harry, but that call, as of yet, had not been returned. Other whispers suggested that Prince Edward and Sophie, usually neutral players, had expressed concern that removing Meghan's titles could create irreparable divisions. Yet there were moments that revealed deeper tensions. At a small, private reception with military veterans, Queen Camilla was asked by a guest what she thought of all the drama. She reportedly smiled and said, "The thing about drama is it doesn't last long if people stop watching." Though it may have been an offhand comment, royal observers read between the lines. The Queen was tired of the spectacle. And while the monarchy reeled internally, staff morale began to sink. Palace aides described a renewed sense of exhaustion, one that harked back to the chaotic months after the Sussex's original departure in 2020. One long-serving staff member said, "We thought it had calmed down. Now it's as if the storm never ended." Still, the palace's focus remained on stability. King Charles, despite his private anguish, appeared at his next public engagement without hesitation. Standing at a charity event for youth mental health, he delivered a speech that made no mention of the unfolding crisis. His words were calm, measured, filled with platitudes about resilience and community. But those who knew him could see the strain behind his eyes. The Queen stood beside him, poised as ever, with not a flicker of tension on her face. William, in Wales that same day, made no comment to the press. But in a subtle gesture that royal watchers were quick to dissect, he wore a tie known to have been gifted to him by his grandmother, a silent nod to the values she held dear. And then there was Anne. The Princess Royal, as expected, carried on without missing a beat. She opened a rural community center, shook hands with veterans, and offered no opinion. But those who attended the event noted that she was unusually stern, even for her. One local counselor described her demeanor as steel and tweed. Inside the palace, however, the question remained unresolved. How would the monarchy respond if the petition passed both houses of parliament? Would Charles formally strip the titles through letters patent? Would he resist, citing constitutional neutrality? Or would he offer Meghan the opportunity to relinquish them voluntarily, sparking yet another media spectacle? None of these answers were known, but one thing was certain. The royal family was not merely weathering a public relations storm. It was bracing for a constitutional reckoning. As word of the parliamentary petition spread beyond the hallowed halls of Westminster and the guarded confines of Buckingham Palace, a wildfire of public reaction ignited across the United Kingdom and then, rapidly, around the world. The matter of whether Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, should be stripped of her royal title was no longer merely a constitutional question. It had become a cultural flashpoint, a societal Rorschach test through which millions revealed their beliefs about class, race, loyalty, power, and the very purpose of the modern monarchy. The first wave of response came from within the UK. Social media platforms like X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook exploded with hashtags and threads that ranged from outrage to celebration. Within hours of the petition's announcement, hashtag Remove Her Title began trending nationally, followed closely by hashtag Stand With Meghan. Influencers, commentators, former royal staffers, and even public figures jumped into the fray, issuing statements, reposting archive footage, and dissecting every angle of the story. Among those adding fuel to the fire was television host and longtime Meghan critic Piers Morgan, who took to social media to post a blunt message about time. Titles are earned through duty, not drama. The post garnered over 1 million views within hours, triggering a cascade of comments both in agreement and furious opposition. In contrast, British author and activist Dr. Shola Moshogbamamil, a vocal defender of Meghan, condemned the petition as a veiled act of institutional racism dressed up in patriotism. She continued, "This isn't about titles. This is about punishing a woman who challenged the royal status quo and lived to tell the tale." News outlets split quickly along ideological lines. The Daily Mail and The Sun published front-page stories the following morning with headlines such as "Strip Her Now" and "Royal Shame Returns." These papers cited unnamed palace sources who claimed Meghan's continued use of the Duchess title tarnished the dignity of the crown. In contrast, The Guardian and The Independent ran more measured coverage, offering space to legal scholars and cultural critics who questioned the political motivations behind the petition. It wasn't long before the controversy breached British shores. In the United States, where Meghan and Prince Harry now reside, the media narrative took on a starkly different tone. On MSNBC, hosts raised questions about British institutional hostility toward women of color, while CNN aired extended panel discussions dissecting the constitutional precedent for title removal. Even daytime talk shows like The View and The Talk turned the royal family's scandal into headline topics, with co-hosts fiercely debating whether Meghan had ever been accepted by the British establishment in the first place. Meghan's allies in Hollywood were swift to speak. Oprah Winfrey, whose bombshell 2021 interview with Meghan and Harry had initially rocked the monarchy, released a brief but impactful statement. "We must be vigilant when power is used to silence." Serena Williams, a close friend of Meghan, posted a black-and-white image of the Duchess with the caption, "Dignity doesn't need titles." Within hours, Over 1 million likes surged through the post. Conversely, some high-profile voices pushed back. British-American comedian John Oliver, known for his sharp-tongued critiques of the monarchy, surprised many by saying, "I'm no royalist, but if you resign from a job, you don't keep the title on the door. That's not racism. That's logic." The cultural divide deepened as street protests sprang up in London, Manchester, and Bristol. In Trafalgar Square, royal traditionalists, many draped in Union Jack flags, chanted slogans like "Protect the Crown" and "No titles for traitors." Their signs bore phrases such as "public duty" or "private profit," and "Stop the Netflix monarchy." But across the River Thames, in South Bank, a counter-protest took place simultaneously. Meghan supporters, many from Britain's black and immigrant communities, rallied under banners reading, "We see you, Meghan, and royalty is not whiteness." One activist stood atop a bench and delivered an impassioned speech. "If they strip her of her title today, they'll strip others of their dignity tomorrow. This is about who gets to belong." The tension spilled into Parliament Square as the two opposing groups briefly crossed paths. Police intervened swiftly, preventing physical clashes, but the shouting was visceral. "She's not one of us," bellowed one man in his 60s. "That's the problem," replied a young woman. "You never wanted her to be." Outside of the UK and the US, international response varied widely. In Canada, where Harry and Meghan briefly lived, the issue was discussed with a blend of bemusement and concern. CBC Radio questioned whether the monarchy still held any relevance to Canadian identity. In Australia, the debate reopened long-standing Republican sentiments, with former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull stating, "If the royals are this chaotic, perhaps it's time we revisit whether we need them at all." Meanwhile, in South Africa, a country Meghan had spoken warmly of during her royal tour, there was widespread outrage. Prominent journalist Rady Tlabe tweeted, "This is more than royalty. This is about a woman of color being subjected to global humiliation for refusing to be silent." Even in countries where the monarchy held little sway, like India and Brazil, the debate became symbolic. Indian feminist groups tied Meghan's plight to broader struggles faced by women navigating patriarchal institutions. Brazilian commentators drew parallels between the spectacle and their own political theater. As the public discourse intensified, a new battleground emerged: TikTok. The platform became a war zone of edited videos, royal commentary, and viral explainers. A young British creator known as @RoyalRealness posted a side-by-side comparison of Meghan's speeches and the late Princess Diana's interviews, captioned, "History doesn't repeat, it rhymes." The video received over 10 million views in just 2 days. On the flip side, pro-monarchy creators began posting "Then and Now" compilations showing Queen Elizabeth II in formal attire opening Parliament, juxtaposed with images of Meghan and Harry at celebrity events. The implied message: the Sussexes had traded duty for decadence. More complicated still was the reaction among youth. Polls conducted by YouGov revealed that younger Britons, particularly those under 30, were more likely to support Meghan retaining her title. Older generations, by contrast, favored removing it by a wide margin. This generational gap underscored a deeper divide over the relevance of monarchy itself. Amid the cacophony, the Sussexes themselves remained silent. No formal statement was released from their Montecito estate. Paparazzi staked out their California mansion, helicopters hovered intermittently, and freelance journalists scoured local sources for any hint of reaction. Meghan was spotted once, driving her black Range Rover through Santa Barbara, sunglasses on, lips pursed. The image dominated tabloids for days. Speculation about Harry's state of mind intensified. Columnists wrote with thinly veiled condescension about the man torn between two worlds, while others described him as the tragic prince caught in a constitutional hurricane. Some questioned whether Harry would defend his wife publicly or if he'd pressure her to give up the title voluntarily to end the scrutiny. That possibility, voluntary relinquishment, became a hot topic on talk radio and in editorial pages. A proposal emerged from a group of moderate commentators that Meghan retain the courtesy of Duchess in private life but agree not to use it in professional contexts. But critics on both sides pounced. Traditionalists said it didn't go far enough. Meghan's defenders called it a performative compromise rooted in humiliation. The royalists, sensing momentum, began organizing formal campaigns. Petitions sprung up across change.org and parliament.uk, demanding the Monarchy Act swiftly. Fundraising drives emerged to sponsor billboards reading titles demand loyalty. One billboard was erected outside Westminster within 72 hours, a stark black and white image of Queen Elizabeth with the words, "She earned it." Did Meghan? Not to be outdone, Meghan supporters launched their own fundraising effort titled Dignity Has No Title. They raised over £300,000 in just 5 days, pledging to donate funds to women's charities in Meghan's name. The campaign, organized by a coalition of grassroots activists, said the petition's tone was disproportionate, punitive, and targeted. In the midst of this, a new scandal briefly threatened to derail the public discourse. An anonymous source claimed to have knowledge of an internal royal memo suggesting that the family had considered preemptively revoking Harry and Meghan's titles in 2021, well before the current petition. Though unverified, the rumor set off another round of outrage and speculation. The palace declined to comment, fueling further suspicion. The reactionary atmosphere had begun to take on a life of its own. Bookstores reported a spike in sales for biographies of Princess Diana, Queen Elizabeth, and Prince Harry's memoir, Spare. Late-night comedians made it a nightly topic. Podcasts were launched overnight with names like Title Fight and Sussex Showdown. Even school classrooms weren't immune. Teachers reported students debating the issue during lessons. At one secondary school in Birmingham, a teacher shared that students had turned a history lesson into a full-fledged courtroom-style debate over Meghan's title. This was no longer just a royal matter. It was a social one, a political one, and for some, a deeply personal one. Yet as the days rolled on and emotions began to harden into ideology, one unsettling truth became clear: no resolution would be clean. Stripping Meghan of her title would enrage millions and further damage the already brittle image of the monarchy among younger generations and global audiences. Letting her keep it would signal, to others, weakness, hypocrisy, or a failure to uphold royal standards. And so the tension grew, fed by every tweet, every broadcast, every celebrity comment, every viral clip. The world was no longer merely watching. It was participating. Inside the hallowed and historic walls of Buckingham Palace, beyond the public-facing statements and carefully curated appearances, the mood had shifted palpably. The public eruption over the petition to strip Meghan Markle of her royal title was not just an external political dilemma. It had become a deeply personal and destabilizing issue for the House of Windsor. No family, even one as ancient and stoic as the British royal family, could remain unaffected when their name, legacy, and future were being dissected on the global stage in real time. At the center of the institution, King Charles III found himself ensnared in a storm he had long feared but never truly prepared for. Ascending the throne had thrust him into a role he had awaited for over 7 decades, and yet, just months into his reign, the monarchy was again under siege, not from a foreign threat or economic crisis, but from a cultural reckoning and a public increasingly skeptical of royal relevance. Now, he had to decide whether to support the petition that called for stripping his son's wife of a title he himself had bestowed. Sources close to the palace confirmed that Charles was torn between two imperatives: protecting the dignity of the monarchy and preserving the fragile peace within his own family. Behind closed doors, he was described as irritable, short-tempered, and at times visibly burdened by the decision before him. His aides reported long private meetings in the palace's blue drawing room, where he consulted legal experts, constitutional scholars, and members of his inner circle. Not just for counsel, but for reassurance that he was not making a mistake that history would judge harshly. Queen Camilla, by contrast, was said to be unequivocal in her stance. According to a senior courtier who requested anonymity, Camilla reportedly argued that the institution must come first. She had not forgotten the Sussexes' explosive 2021 interview with Oprah, during which both she and Charles had faced allegations of indifference and implicit bias. Camilla was said to believe that failing to respond decisively now would be interpreted as weakness, and more damningly, as tacit approval of the narrative the Sussexes had constructed. Privately, Camilla was alleged to have made pointed remarks during internal family discussions. "You can't burn the house down and expect to keep the key," she was reported to have said during a private meeting with Charles and senior aides, a line that would later be paraphrased by a royal commentator in a televised interview, fueling speculation that it had indeed come from the Queen consort herself. Meanwhile, Prince William, the heir to the throne and arguably the monarchy's most pivotal figure moving forward, adopted a more restrained, but no less firm position. William had long distanced himself from his brother Harry, particularly since the publication of Harry's memoir, Spare, which had laid bare intimate and painful chapters from their childhood and portrayed William as emotionally distant and at times even aggressive. For William, the petition was not merely about Meghan. It was about drawing a line in the sand. In private conversations with trusted allies, he reportedly stated that the royal family could not continue to extend courtesy to those who actively damaged the crown's integrity. His language, carefully chosen, underscored a deeper truth: the rift between the brothers was no longer emotional, it had become political. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense approach and often regarded as the monarchy's most dutiful member, also weighed in. Though she rarely spoke publicly on such issues, palace insiders noted that she supported taking a clear stance. In a private lunch with Charles, she reportedly reminded him of the importance of precedent and the monarchy's long history of acting decisively to protect its image. "We survived Wallis Simpson and Diana's divorce," she was heard saying, "but only by acting, not dithering." Notably silent in public but active behind the scenes was Prince Edward. As a man who had largely kept his distance from controversies, he now found himself subtly trying to bridge the chasm between factions of the family. In meetings, he was said to urge caution and moderation, warning that stripping Meghan of her title could inflame tensions further, particularly among the younger generation and the Commonwealth's more diverse populations. But it was Princess Catherine's position that intrigued many observers most. Publicly poised and perpetually diplomatic, Kate had endured years of side-by-side comparisons with Meghan, many of them flattering to her but still emotionally taxing. Sources close to her indicated a quiet but profound sense of betrayal, not from Meghan's words alone, but from what she perceived as the deliberate fracturing of the royal family's image. During a private dinner with William and senior staff at Kensington Palace, she reportedly expressed frustration at the relentless focus on the Sussexes. "It's always about them," she is said to have remarked, "and never about what we're trying to build here." Her words, though calm, reflected a growing fatigue, the sense that the monarchy had been held hostage to Harry and Meghan's narrative for far too long. Amid this internal chaos, communications staff across multiple royal households scrambled to construct a unified front. Drafts of potential statements were drawn up, each carefully weighed for tone and content. Should the king express regret? Should the palace reaffirm its commitment to inclusivity while distancing itself from the Sussexes' actions? Or should it remain silent and let Parliament carry the burden of responsibility? The decision not to comment publicly, for the time being, was strategic, but it was not without cost. As the media frenzy continued unabated, the royal family's silence was interpreted by some as cowardice, by others as quiet fury. The absence of any message was a message in itself, one that left room for conjecture, satire, and further polarization. Behind the scenes, Charles reportedly reached out to Harry through unofficial channels. The message, according to palace sources, was conciliatory but clear: the situation was spiraling, and some form of mutual understanding needed to be reached. There was no response. Whether that silence was Harry's decision or a result of legal advice remained uncertain. What was clear, however, was that Harry was facing pressure from both sides. Reports from Montecito indicated that the Duke of Sussex was under increasing emotional strain. Friends close to the couple described Harry as torn and deeply conflicted, with one source stating, "He's loyal to his wife, but he knows what this is doing to his father." The question of whether Meghan would voluntarily relinquish her title also became a subject of intense speculation within the palace. Some senior royals believed such a gesture might soften the public mood. Others warned that it would be seen as a symbolic surrender, further emboldening critics and weakening Harry's position within the family. As the internal deliberations dragged on, Charles found himself haunted by the specter of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. She had weathered crises ranging from Diana's death to Prince Andrew's disgrace. Her strategy had always been to preserve the institution at all costs, sometimes at the expense of familial warmth or transparency. Now Charles had to decide whether to emulate that approach or redefine it for a more volatile, media-saturated era. In his private study, beneath a portrait of the late Queen, Charles reportedly spent hours in solitude, reading, pacing, reflecting. He spoke to long-trusted advisors from his time as Prince of Wales and even summoned a former Archbishop of Canterbury for spiritual counsel. The weight of legacy bore down heavily on him, not just as a monarch, but as a father. Ultimately, the family's internal response was marked not by unity but by fragmentation. There was no shared consensus, no united voice. Each royal, whether vocal or restrained, saw the issue through their own lens, shaped by duty, personal history, public scrutiny, and private pain. And as the world continued to watch and wait, Buckingham Palace remained outwardly serene, but inwardly split, a gilded cage, filled not just with traditions and expectations, but with silence, resentment, and the fear that, this time, the storm might not pass. The moment the petition to strip Meghan Markle of her Duchess title gained viral momentum, the media landscape ignited into a blaze of commentary, division, and relentless speculation. From London to Los Angeles, tabloids, broadsheets, podcasts, and live streams all converged on a single headline, magnifying the story into one of the most dominant global conversations in recent memory. Across the United Kingdom, the mainstream press was the first to pounce. The Daily Mail's front page read like a call to arms. Enough is enough, next to an image of Meghan in a white designer coat, looking both defiant and poised. The paper's editorial column suggested that the petition was not merely a backlash from fringe monarchists but a reflection of growing disillusionment with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Their op-ed asked readers if titles should be a birthright or something earned and maintained through service. The Times, in a more restrained but no less pointed tone, emphasized the constitutional implications. Their political editor dissected whether a petition of this nature, having now surpassed 2 million signatures, could legally trigger parliamentary action or force the king's hand. Analysts cited rare but precedent-setting cases in royal history, comparing Meghan's current situation to that of Edward VIII's post-abdication controversies. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American media outlets took a very different approach. CNN, MSNBC, and The View ran hours of coverage focusing on the racial and cultural implications of the backlash against Meghan. Their central thesis was that the petition, though clothed in royal protocol, was fueled in part by an undercurrent of racial and social resentment, particularly from conservative factions within British society. Analysts on these platforms drew direct parallels between Meghan's treatment and the systemic targeting of black women in positions of influence. Fox News, by contrast, treated the story as part of a broader narrative of elitist hypocrisy and cultural rebellion. Meghan and Harry, once darlings of progressive America, were now depicted by some commentators as symbols of victimhood gone wrong. You can't cash in on the monarchy and then insult it, and expect no blowback, one anchor stated during a primetime segment. Social media became a war zone of opinion, passion, misinformation, and tribalism. On Twitter, now X, hashtags like #RemoveHerTitle, #StandWithMeghan, and #MonarchyInCrisis began trending worldwide. The digital battlefield was divided along predictable lines, but the volume of discourse exceeded anything the palace had encountered in the post-Diana era. Celebrity voices also began weighing in, further inflaming an already volatile narrative. Sharon Osbourne declared during an appearance on Talk TV that Meghan deserves every bit of backlash she's getting, calling the Duchess manipulative and ungrateful. Piers Morgan, whose antagonism toward Meghan was long-standing and well-documented, released a scathing column titled, "Why Meghan Must Go," arguing that her continued use of the royal title, while simultaneously denouncing the institution, was the height of hypocrisy. On the other side of the spectrum, actresses Viola Davis and Gabrielle Union publicly expressed support for Meghan. Davis posted on Instagram, "The double standards are grotesque. Meghan has done nothing but defend her family, her truth, and her peace." Oprah Winfrey, though more restrained, was said to be monitoring the situation closely, considering whether to make a follow-up public statement after her bombshell 2021 interview re-entered public discourse with renewed intensity. Influencers, too, became key players in shaping the dialogue. TikTok creators produced video essays dissecting Meghan's past interviews, parsing every word and expression for insight. Instagram meme pages began sharing side-by-side photos of Meghan and Princess Diana, reigniting the long-standing narrative that history was repeating itself. YouTubers on both sides of the Atlantic launched live streams dissecting the legal and symbolic weight of the petition, many earning hundreds of thousands of views in a matter of hours. Among the general public, opinion was polarized and often intense. In British high streets, cafes, and pubs, conversations about Meghan dominated the social landscape. In a vox pop conducted in central London by Sky News, middle-aged and older citizens expressed near exhaustion. One woman in her 70s remarked, "I supported her at first, truly I did. But now, it feels like every few months it's another drama. Perhaps it's time to move on." Others, especially younger and more progressive individuals, saw the petition as yet another example of entrenched elitism weaponizing tradition to punish a woman of color who had dared to walk her own path. In parts of the Commonwealth, particularly in nations with their own reckoning with colonial legacies, the petition was met with skepticism. In South Africa, Nigeria, and the Caribbean, major publications questioned whether the royal family, by even entertaining the petition, risked alienating modern, diverse nations whose allegiance to the crown was already wavering. Several local op-eds warned that removing Meghan's title could hasten the disintegration of the Commonwealth itself, an outcome far more threatening to the monarchy than any one family member. Parliamentarians, too, found themselves caught in the whirlwind. While the petition was not legally binding, its swelling support placed pressure on MPs to at least acknowledge it. One Tory MP, who chose to remain anonymous, said, "The royal family is supposed to be above politics, but when the public demands something this loudly, even we have to take note." A backbencher from the Labour Party was more vocal. During a debate on a separate issue, she veered off-topic to declare, "Let us not be distracted by a campaign rooted more in media spectacle than constitutional necessity." Stripping Meghan Markle of her title does not solve the cost of living crisis. Her remarks were met with both applause and jeers from across the chamber. Even the Church of England, rarely involved in such matters, quietly voiced concern about the tone of the public discourse. In a Sunday sermon at Westminster Abbey, a senior bishop remarked that compassion must guide judgment, a veiled but unmistakable reference to the ongoing debate. Financial markets, too, responded in subtle but telling ways. Stock and media companies covering the story most aggressively saw a brief spike. Tabloid sales surged, and royal documentaries on Netflix, including those not affiliated with Harry and Meghan, experienced renewed interest and climbing viewership numbers. The entertainment industry recognized a clear trend. The royal saga was still a commercial goldmine. Amid all this chaos, the most notable absence was Meghan herself. As her name dominated headlines, she remained silent, at least publicly. Her legal team issued a short, strongly worded statement dismissing the petition as a baseless distraction, rooted in misinformation, targeted harassment, and regressive hostility. The statement did little to quell the storm, but served as a line in the sand. Meghan would not be giving interviews, releasing videos, or issuing a formal response. Her silence, to many, spoke louder than any prepared statement could. This silence, however, only intensified speculation. Tabloids suggested that the Duchess was planning to relinquish her title voluntarily in a surprise PR masterstroke, while others claimed she was preparing a countersuit against the organizers of the petition, citing defamation and endangerment. Some commentators began questioning the motivations of the petition's originators. Who were they? What did they gain? While the petition had the appearance of grassroots activism, investigative journalists dug deeper. A Guardian exposé revealed that the primary organizer was affiliated with a British nationalist group with ties to controversial anti-immigration campaigns. This revelation threw the integrity of the petition into question and sparked renewed debate over whether it represented genuine public sentiment or an orchestrated vendetta. Despite this, public support for the petition continued to grow. By the end of the week, it had surpassed 3 million signatures, breaking records for political petitions in the UK. Petition watchers compared its virality to that of Brexit-related initiatives, underscoring its historic impact. What became clear through all this was that Meghan Markle had once again become a litmus test. Not just for the monarchy's future, but for modern society's ongoing struggle with race, gender, celebrity, and power. The media frenzy wasn't merely about a title. It was about what the title meant, who deserved it, and who had the right to decide. As the story reached its fever pitch, broadcasters around the world began preparing special programming. BBC News planned a primetime debate titled Duchess or Danger? The Meghan Markle Question. CNN prepared a special segment featuring legal scholars, constitutional experts, and psychologists. Netflix and Amazon reportedly entered a bidding war for the rights to a documentary exploring the timeline from Meghan's royal wedding to the present crisis. But underneath all the analysis, opinions, and sensationalism, an uncomfortable truth lingered. Public discourse had become so entrenched in narratives, pro-Meghan or anti, that few were asking deeper questions. What did this say about modern royalty? About race and representation in Britain? About who controls the story of the crown? As the headlines screamed louder, and the voices on both sides grew more combative, one thing was certain: this was no longer just a debate over a duchess title. It had become a mirror reflecting a divided society's values, fears, and unresolved history. Inside the gilded corridors of Buckingham Palace, where protocol reigns and tradition governs the tone of every whisper, the unfolding crisis surrounding Meghan Markle's royal title was treated not merely as a public relations challenge, but as a constitutional landmine. Senior courtiers, already well acquainted with crises of varying intensity over the decades, were nevertheless shaken by the scale and ferocity of this petition-driven campaign. From the moment the signature count crossed the first million, the matter ceased to be a tabloid distraction and instead entered the domain of serious discussion. In the Grand Chamber, where the Privy Council often meets, advisors assembled in private, summoned not by formal order but through discreet messaging. These were the Queen's men, now serving under King Charles III, whose primary responsibility was to shield the monarchy from political, legal, and cultural instability. At the heart of the dilemma was a bitter irony. The royal family, an institution steeped in ceremony, lineage, and control, found itself flanked by the forces of modern populism. A viral petition, born from an online movement with no official authority, had managed to pierce the palace walls with unprecedented speed and intensity. And yet, ignoring it was no longer an option. King Charles III, though renowned for his measured temperament and scholarly interest in governance, was not immune to emotion in this matter. Sources close to the palace revealed that he was deeply torn. On one hand, he had long committed himself to a vision of a streamlined, duty-focused monarchy, one that trimmed unnecessary titles and roles to reflect a more modern and cost-conscious crown. On the other hand, Meghan was not just a former working royal but also his son's wife and the mother of his grandchildren. It was this duality that reportedly caused heated exchanges behind closed doors between King Charles and Prince William. While the king advocated patience and quiet evaluation, William, ever pragmatic and increasingly seen as the de facto CEO of the monarchy's future, argued that inaction would make the royal family appear weak. To William, the moment demanded clarity and backbone. "People are watching," William allegedly told aides during a private consultation at Kensington Palace. "They want to see where the monarchy stands. If we let this spiral, it reflects on all of us, not just Harry and Meghan." William's sense of urgency wasn't purely political. Privately, he had long harbored doubts about Meghan's intentions. From the early days of her engagement to Harry, there had been friction, not born entirely from personality differences, but from a deeper ideological clash. William, raised with the unspoken rule that duty superseded desire, viewed the monarchy as a lifelong commitment. Meghan, on the other hand, had approached it as an institution that needed change and reflection. This difference in worldview had long been a source of tension. As the petition spread like wildfire, William saw it as a public validation of his private concerns. Though he refrained from making any public comment consistent with palace policy, his demeanor toward internal briefings reportedly became sharper, more resolved. He believed the royal family's credibility was on the line, and the response must be deliberate and firm. At the same time, Queen Camilla, often underestimated in royal dynamics, emerged as an influential voice in the palace. Known for her calm pragmatism and no-nonsense approach to controversy, she advocated for a middle ground. Her view, according to insiders, was that the monarchy must not appear vindictive. To strip Meghan of her title without offering a clear, apolitical rationale would be seen not only as punitive but as a capitulation to online mobs. Titles should mean something, Camilla reportedly told a senior aide, but they shouldn't be used as weapons. If we do this, it must be for the integrity of the institution, not personal resentment. Meanwhile, the Queen Consort's private relationship with Prince Harry, once warm and rehabilitative, had deteriorated considerably. She felt personally wounded by some of the insinuations in Harry's memoir, particularly references that painted her as opportunistic and self-serving. Though she remained outwardly composed, her influence in palace decisions regarding Meghan was unmistakable. Prince Harry, for his part, was reeling. Despite his public image as the rebel royal, he remained emotionally tethered to the institution he had left behind. Friends close to him in Montecito described a man both enraged and heartbroken. The petition felt like an assault not just on Meghan, but on his very identity as a Windsor. "It's like they're trying to erase us," he reportedly confided to a confidant. "First it was the press, then the public, and now even my own family won't defend her." This sense of betrayal was deepened by the fact that, according to Harry, no one from the palace had reached out to him directly since the petition erupted. Not Charles, not William, not even his cousins with whom he'd shared a childhood. The silence, for Harry, was deafening. In Montecito, where the Sussexes reside in relative seclusion, the atmosphere turned tense. The normally bustling household quieted as Meghan and Harry conferred with lawyers, crisis managers, and a small circle of loyal friends. Publicly, they remained quiet. Privately, they were seething. One source close to their legal team claimed that Harry had floated the idea of addressing the British public directly through a recorded message or even a press conference. His advisors, however, cautioned against it. The optics, they warned, would further inflame tensions and risk alienating even more of the British public.